11 powerful Stoic techniques to handle criticism and insults calmly. The crowd roars. You're standing in the middle of it, surrounded by eyes judging, scrutinizing. An insult is hurled your way, a verbal stone thrown with the precision of a knife. You feel the sting, but then, something extraordinary happens. You smile, not because you're unaffected, but because you've unlocked a secret, the power to master your response, not the insult itself. This is the art of Stoicism. Imagine if every insult, every piece of criticism, could roll off you like water off a duck's back. What if you could turn criticism into clarity and insults into insights? In this video, we're diving into the profound wisdom of Stoicism, 11 transformative techniques that can make you unshakable. But first, let me ask, when someone criticizes you, are they revealing more about you or about themselves? Let's begin with Marcus Aurelius. Picture him, the most powerful man in Rome, yet surrounded by betrayal, political backstabbing, and incessant scrutiny. How did he handle it? His secret lies in understanding what Stoics call the dichotomy of control. Marcus knew that while he couldn't control what others said, he could control how he responded. He famously wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Let's break this down into actionable wisdom. The first technique is a mental mantra. Separate what's within your control from what's not. When criticism comes your way, pause. Ask yourself, is this about me or something outside my influence? You'll often realize that insults are reflections of the insulter's internal state, not your worth. Their words don't have to be your reality. But what about the insult that stings because it feels true? This is where our second Stoic technique comes in. Turn criticism into feedback. Epictetus said, "If someone proves me wrong, I will gladly change." Use criticism as a mirror. Reflect on it. If it holds truth, let it guide your growth. If it doesn't, discard it like an empty vessel. To see this in action, imagine a young entrepreneur pitching her idea to a room of investors. One sneers, calling her vision naive. She could crumble or she could channel the third technique. Practice premeditation of insults. This involves mentally rehearsing potential criticisms before stepping into a situation. By preparing for the worst, she transforms fear into resilience. When the insult arrives, it's not a surprise. It's simply part of the game. Let's pause for a moment. Think about a recent insult or criticism you faced. Did you react emotionally, or did you step back and assess it calmly? Here's a profound question for you. Are you truly free if someone else's words can control your peace? As we continue, let's touch on the fourth technique. Embrace indifference. Stoics called it apatheia, a state of equanimity. It doesn't mean being cold or detached. It means seeing insults as neutral events. Like a tree in a storm, you remain rooted while the wind howls. Ask yourself, if someone calls you a fool, does that make you one? Or is it merely their opinion, passing like a cloud? This ties into our fifth technique, reframe the insult. Imagine a friend jokingly says you're terrible at singing. Instead of taking offense, laugh and reply, "You're right, but I'm improving." By reframing the insult, you strip it of power and turn it into connection. Criticism often feels personal, but it rarely is, which brings us to the sixth technique. Understand the source. Seneca reminds us, whoever is angry at what is spoken is more disturbed by the truth of it than the insult. Often, criticism is born from insecurity, envy, or misunderstanding. Recognizing this diffuses its sting. Picture someone hurling insults at you. Instead of reacting, see them as a person in pain, projecting their struggles outward. Can you offer empathy instead of retaliation? Before we proceed, let me ask you, if you could see criticism as an opportunity for growth rather than an attack, how would your life change? The Stoic superpower, turning insults into inner freedom. What does freedom mean to you? Is it the absence of control by others, or the mastery of your internal world? Imagine standing unshaken in the face of criticism, not because you're invincible, but because you've mastered the art of responding with calm clarity. This is the Stoic superpower, freedom from emotional turbulence. Let's pick up where we left off. You now understand that insults are often reflections of the insulter, not you. But what if the criticism comes from someone you respect, a mentor, a loved one? This is where the seventh technique comes in. View criticism as a test of virtue. The Stoics believed that every challenge is an opportunity to practice virtue. Criticism tests your patience, wisdom, and humility. Ask yourself, am I living according to my principles? Or am I reacting impulsively? Here's an example. Imagine a young philosopher named Aristo. One day, a rival publicly ridicules him, calling him a fraud. Aristo pauses and calmly replies, "If I am a fraud, prove it. If I am not, your words are hollow." By staying aligned with his virtue of rationality, Aristo turns the insult into a demonstration of strength. Would you have the same composure? Now let's explore the eighth technique, silence as strength. Epictetus teaches us that often, the wisest response to criticism is no response at all. Silence can disarm an insulter, create space for reflection, both for you and for them. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable silence makes someone who expects a reaction? It's a powerful tool. But silence doesn't mean passivity. This brings us to the ninth technique, respond. Don't react. Picture a sailor navigating stormy seas. Reacting to every wave would sink the ship. Instead, the sailor responds thoughtfully, steering toward calmer waters. When facing criticism, pause, breathe, choose your words carefully. A measured response often carries more weight than a heated reaction. Pause for a moment and reflect. When was the last time you truly chose your response to criticism, rather than letting it choose you? The 10th technique is one of the most transformative. Detach from ego. Ego craves validation and recoils from criticism. The Stoics teach that the self is separate from the ego. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You are a soul carrying a corpse." What he meant was that your essence is not tied to external opinions. When you detach from ego, criticism loses its ability to harm you. Instead of thinking, "How dare they insult me?" you can think, "This is not about me." To make this practical, let's consider an everyday scenario. Imagine you're at work, and a colleague critiques your idea in a meeting. Your ego flares up, demanding you defend yourself. But if you detach from ego, you see the situation objectively. Perhaps the critique has merit, or perhaps it doesn't. Either way, your peace remains intact. Here's a deep question for you. What would your life look like if your sense of self wasn't tied to what others think of you? And finally, the 11th technique. Remember the impermanence of words. The Stoics were deeply aware of life's fleeting nature. Seneca said, "Time heals what reason cannot." Insults, like passing storms, eventually fade. When someone criticizes you, ask yourself, will this matter in a year? In a month? In a week? Often, the answer is no. But let's go deeper. Imagine criticism as an echo in a vast canyon. It may feel loud in the moment, but over time, it fades into the silence of your inner calm. Can you embrace that silence, even as the world shouts around you? As we conclude this part, let's recap. You've learned to separate what's within your control, turn criticism into feedback, and detach from ego. You've discovered the power of silence, reframing, and impermanence. These are not just techniques, they are keys to freedom. Here's a final thought for this part. What if the harshest criticism you ever faced was actually the greatest gift for your growth? Unshakable peace, the final step to mastering criticism and insults. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself standing in a storm. The winds howl, the rain lashes, but you stand unmoved, calm at your core. The storm is criticism, the rain is insults, and your peace is the mastery you've cultivated. This is the unshakable peace Stoicism offers. As we move into this final part, let's reflect on the journey so far. You've learned how to detach from ego, transform criticism into growth, and silence your mind in the face of insults. Now, let's deepen that understanding and explore the profound, final steps to mastering this art. One of the ultimate Stoic lessons is the practice of amor fati, a love of fate. This means embracing everything that happens to you, including criticism and insults, as necessary parts of your life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Criticism, then, is fuel for your growth. Instead of resisting it, what if you welcomed it? Ask yourself, what would it mean to love the very challenges you once dreaded? Let's turn to another powerful concept. View life as a theater. Epictetus said, "Remember that you are an actor in a play, which is as the playwright wants it to be." In this metaphor, criticism becomes a line in the script, temporary, scripted, and ultimately insignificant. Your role is not to rewrite the script but to perform with grace. Imagine being criticized as part of your role. Could you step back and see it as part of the play, rather than an attack on your character? This perspective naturally leads to another profound Stoic technique. Practice gratitude for adversity. Criticism sharpens your character. It reveals your blind spots and strengthens your resilience. Think of it as a teacher. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." When someone criticizes you, pause and silently thank them for the lesson they unknowingly offered. It's not easy, but it's transformative. Now let's consider the importance of releasing the need for validation. The Stoics believed that true freedom comes from within. If you rely on external validation, you become a prisoner of others' opinions. Marcus Aurelius advised, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own. Why give others control over your inner peace?" Reflect. If your self-worth doesn't come from others, where does it come from? Here's a deeply practical step. Anchor yourself in the present moment. Criticism often drags us into the past or projects us into the future. You replay the insult or imagine its consequences. But the present is where your power lies. When criticized, take a deep breath and ground yourself. Feel your feet on the ground. Hear the sounds around you. Remind yourself that this moment, right now, is all there is. Let's also revisit the role of compassion in mastering criticism. Imagine the person criticizing you is struggling with their own insecurities, fears, or misunderstandings. Instead of seeing them as an adversary, see them as a fellow human navigating their own challenges. Compassion doesn't mean accepting unjust behavior. It means refusing to let anger consume you. Ask yourself, what does the critic's behavior reveal about their own pain? Finally, we arrive at the essence of Stoicism, freedom through self-mastery. Epictetus reminds us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." To master criticism, you must master your emotions, your perceptions, and your reactions. This isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about understanding them. When insulted, observe the anger or hurt that arises. Instead of acting on it, let it pass like a wave receding from the shore. As we close, let me leave you with one last question. If you could face every insult, every criticism, with calm, unshakable peace, what else in life could possibly disturb you? In mastering these 11 Stoic techniques, you've gained more than just strategies for handling criticism. You've gained a blueprint for emotional freedom. Criticism no longer controls you. Insults no longer define you. You've become, as the Stoics would say, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, true power lies within. See you next time, and until then, stay grounded, stay stoic, and stay free.